So, hello and welcome to the April General Meeting of the League of Women Voters of Champaign County. We are once again being broadcast live on public TV and will be rebroadcast again in the near future. And you can also get our meetings on YouTube later on. Today's meeting, we are discussing the topic of environmental sustainability when it comes to energy, and specifically in Champaign County. We have three panelists with us today. We'll go through and have them introduce themselves, and then after that, each of them will give a short presentation about their stuff, and then we'll ask them some questions. So with very little further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Patrick Ridgely. You want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Patrick Ridgely. I'm with Ameren. I've been with them for about 15 years. I graduated from Carbondale in 2003. I first worked with Ameren UE in Boonville, Missouri as a single point of contact for customers, builders, and developers. I moved to the corporate office in St. Louis to work as a distribution system planning engineer, where I did system studies on Ameren's high voltage distribution system. And then in 2012, I moved here to Champaign as a consulting engineer. My office is just off Lincoln over the interstate. So, thank you.
David?
Okay. My name is Dave Sherwood. I'm a retired professor in the biology field at the University of Illinois. In retirement, I have devoted a great deal of my time toward environmental issues, primarily through the Earth Care team at First Presbyterian Church of Urbana. We are an Earth Care congregation. We have certification for our activities in the environmental area, and Barb Schleicher is an active member of that team, and she's the one that collared me and brought me in here for you. I would just say, I'll be talking about what my wife Julie, who's sitting here in the front row, and I have done in our residence to make it more energy efficient, moving towards sustainable.
Scott?
Hello, I'm Scott Tess. I'm the Environmental Sustainability Manager for the City of Urbana. I've been with the city a little over 5 years now. I work on energy, water, waste, recycling, municipal electric aggregation, electricity procurement, anything that touches on those sustainability topics might end up in my lap, and always happy to talk to you all about those items. I most recently came from Orange County, Florida, where I worked on a couple of different programs, pollution prevention program and stormwater programs, and was happy to come to Urbana and have an opportunity to do bigger, better, more interesting, more broad-based sustainability work.
Okay. Let's go ahead and get started with our presentations. Do you want to go first, Patrick?
I can.
Oh, apparently I've had a suggestion that I start with Scott. So.
Oh,
okay. Sure.
Just to put you on the spot.
Not a problem, not a problem. So Urbana has long been a leader in sustainability. Many of you probably know that. We have the oldest curbside recycling program in the state of Illinois. And that was really just the start. Zooming to current, we have a climate action plan that was passed, approved by City Council several years ago. It set some pretty ambitious energy and climate goals. The goals were to reduce the community's greenhouse gases. So not just city buildings and city fleet, but the community's greenhouse gas emissions, 25% by 2020 and 80% by 2050. Those are ambitious goals and in line with the Paris Agreement and in line with what other cities were doing. However, recently we've had some folks from the community from a couple of different organizations, Sierra Club and I Matter, a youth group, come to us and say, look, the science says we need to be carbon neutral by 2040, not 80% reduction by 2050. And they were really great to talk with. We had a lot of dialogue with them about setting goals and what we can work on to achieve those goals. And in the end, they told us, look, we understand that you don't know exactly how to get to carbon neutral by 2040 right now, but that still is what we need. So that needs to be the goal. And so City Council heard that appeal and was convinced by that argument. And so now the city's goals include still our 25% reduction by 2020, a new 100% renewable electricity goal by 2025, and a carbon neutral goal by 2040. So very tall order for the sustainability division at the City of Urbana. One of the biggest ways that we have reduced our greenhouse gases so far is by procuring renewable energy credits along with all of the electricity that our residents purchase through municipal electric aggregation. If you're in Urbana, you probably know a little bit about aggregation. Essentially, we, the city, competitively select or competitively secure a really low electricity price that any of our residents can use for their household electricity supply. Now, Ameren is still going to deliver the electricity. You still pay Ameren for maintaining the power lines and so forth. But the power, the electricity itself, the electrons themselves are coming from a source that you choose or that we selected through this competitive process. Because we were able to lower the price that you pay for electricity, we use some of those savings to buy renewable energy credits, and that greens our electricity supply, so it makes it renewable. That's the biggest chunk that we've been able to take out of our greenhouse gas emissions. We've been doing a lot of work the last 2.5 years on solar in Urbana. And we wanted to do a couple of things. One, we wanted to improve our solar market overall, and a couple of specific things on that. First, we have been and continue to evaluate our planning, zoning, and permitting with respect to solar energy, so solar panels, solar arrays on the ground, on your roof. And what we're working to do is make our planning, zoning, permitting as easy, fast, and cheap as possible so that lots of folks can buy a solar array or lease a solar array or buy power from a new local solar array. So we're working on that through a program called SolSmart. It's a DOE, Department of Energy, recognition or best practices and recognition program. So DOE lays out a number of best practices. A city implements some number of them, and then the city gets some level of designation. So SolSmart Silver, SolSmart Gold, that sort of thing. We're very close to a SolSmart Silver designation, but we're working on a couple more things to try and get a few last points on that. Another thing we've been working on, this was a project early on in this effort, was sort of demonstrating and leading that Urbana is a good place to have solar energy. And we demonstrated that and led on that by competitively procuring a solar array for a city facility. And we did that for the Arbor Shop, which is probably no one's ever seen. It's sort of behind the scenes at Urbana's closed landfill. And we did that through a power purchase agreement where the vendor owns, operates the solar array, and we just buy the power off of it. So we established that, yes, solar is a viable technology. We get plenty of sunlight in Illinois for solar energy. And two, that the price is viable. We are not spending additional money on that solar array. It's essentially cost neutral compared to what we would otherwise pay for electricity. The next thing we've been doing for 2 years, we're about to start our third round, is our bulk solar purchase program. This is an effort that the city and the Midwest Renewable Energy Association lead, where we competitively select one installer who will give us bulk pricing and go out and promote a bulk purchase program to all the residents, not just Urbana, but Champaign County. And by doing this, we drive down the price of a solar array installation. And that allows more people to get involved because price is sensitive on this. When you buy a solar array, the panels are warranted for probably 25 years. So what you're essentially doing is you're pre-purchasing your electricity 25 years ahead. That's great. You get knowledge of how much things are going to cost for the next 25 years, but it does mean that all that cost is sort of front-loaded. You got to pay that out at the beginning. So we want to drive down that cost. And so we've done that successfully the last 2 years. We've got over 1 megawatt of solar capacity installed on over 100 different homes and businesses in Champaign County in 2 years, and we're going for our 3rd year. So look for some announcements probably in the next couple weeks. We'll be starting solar power hours, where we talk about everything you need to know about solar energy and also about our purchasing opportunity. Last thing I want to mention is Urbana has a closed landfill, like many other cities that are older and operated a municipal landfill. Right now, we operate the landscape recycling center on that landfill, but we still have about 40 acres on that landfill, which all we do is mow the lawn, and you would be surprised it's not easy to sell someone a landfill, a closed landfill, so we have no use for it. You can't really build on it, not much, not a big building anyway, without a lot of trouble. But what we are doing now is partnering with a solar developer to install a 2 megawatt solar array, a pretty large solar array on that landfill, and that will serve as many or as few as, and maybe a few more, 3 different purchasers of that electricity. The city will lease that land, and so we'll get revenue from a lease, but we may also be a purchaser of about 1/3 of that electricity. So we would be buying renewable energy or solar energy off of our own landfill. So that's a quick summary of the solar energy work we've been doing, really trying to drive that industry and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the city.
Making sure Barb isn't going to cue me. David, do you want to go next, since you're sitting in the middle already?
All right. Let's see if we get this turned on here. This is a little different.
You can use the left one if you want.
Yeah, there we go.
And then we can do it from beginning.
Yes.
There you go.
And I'm not even sure where's that show up.
It's up there,
TV
and it'll
screen,
be over there too.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just briefly talk today about the things that my wife Julie, louder, thank you, but that my wife Julie and I have done in our residence to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. But before I get into the what we have done, the activities, the why seems very important. And if you look at that photograph or that slide, you'll see 2 bodies lying on the front lawn. Those are our grandsons, Kai and Noah, who live in North Carolina, have come up to our home every other year for a week or so around Christmas time. And they're reveling in what the fruits of the cold weather offers kids from North Carolina in the wintertime. So I would say that our driving motivation for making the changes we've had done in our residence is largely concern about future generations and the conditions they're likely to experience with the ongoing climate change. On how to advance this with this one. Just
press the right key or
the
the down
right key.
probably.
There we go. Okay. Probably many of you have seen the graph similar to this, and I'd ask you to just look at the blue. And what you see is beginning in 1880, going out to 2016, the blue line represents average global temperatures taken from temperature monitors throughout the globe, over water, over land. And the individuals that have put the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the NASA data together have established the period 1880 to 1910 as their baseline. And so what you see is that the average temperatures have climbed progressively. Look at the blue. It's already about 1 degree centigrade, about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit globally. Some places it's even more, like the Arctic. We know the Arctic areas are experiencing much more. What's driving that? It's our use of fossil fuels and the release of the carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide levels are shown in white, and you can see they kind of parallel the rise in temperatures. The carbon dioxide is one of several greenhouse gases. Methane and some of the refrigerants used for air conditioning also contribute, but CO2 released from fossil fuel burning, that is use of coal for electricity generation, use of petroleum for driving our cars, natural gas for heating our homes and other purposes, are driving that. And what you can see is that the CO2 levels were less than 300 parts per million as recently as the late 1800s, and they are now over 400 parts per million. To put that in perspective, scientists have been able to look at the carbon dioxide levels back 800,000 years. Our species originated 300,000 years ago. We are now in uncharted territory. The CO2 levels of 400 or 100 greater than were ever experienced during those 800,000 years. The other, I think, a very sobering thing to consider is that CO2 levels, once they're up there, they don't come down. If we stopped using CO2 and emitting it tomorrow, it'd be hundreds of years before it could go down. So we've locked ourselves into a situation that's going to last a long time. So that's the why of our activities. Can we do anything about it? Absolutely. As residents, if you look, this is where the CO2, these gas emissions come from. And notice electricity is the largest single component. We can make choices on electricity. We can obviously purchase renewable. That's a possibility today. We can buy solar panels, so we can reduce our personal contribution that way. Our transportation choices, notice that's 27%. The vehicles we use, the trips we make, all of those contribute to the emission of the CO2 levels. And then the one we'll talk about today is see the commercial and residential at 12%. And what I'm going to do is talk about what Julie and I have done in our home to reduce our dependence upon fossil fuels. Okay, here's our house, bought it in 1973, built in 1957. It's about 2,400 square feet with nearly a full basement. So over the years, and I think this is important to mention, we did a number of things to reduce the energy use in our home, that is to increase its efficiency. And I know I don't like to look at a slide with a lot of data, but just simply state that before doing the more dramatic things that Julie and I did with our home, we tried to reduce our energy use by getting an energy audit. So have someone come in and tell us, here's your problems. There's the problems with the windows or problems with not enough insulation in the attic and other things. And you can see we did a number of activities, added insulation to the attic, a lot of it. It's hard to negotiate the attic anymore because it's this thick in insulation. We replaced almost all of our windows and sealed around them. And you can see other activities we do, and I won't read the slide to you, but the point is that we improve the envelope, try to reduce your energy use before doing other steps. Well, how were we doing at that point in time? And you can see our home in the orange. We were using less energy than most homes our size, but we still hadn't gotten into the area of great. So there was more we could do to increase the energy efficiency in our home. And so that's what we set out to do. The first thing we did in that regard, and this was not long ago, January 2016, we put geothermal into our home. And as you can see with this cartoon, that involves digging, a well driller puts deep holes down into the ground in which tubing that contains water with a little antifreeze circulates through it. And you take advantage of the constant temperature of the soil's ground, which is about 55 to 57 degrees in this area. And there's a heat exchange between the ground and the loops. And so that this particular diagram shows an example with 3 loops going down. And it indicates there it could be 150 to 400 feet. In our case, it was 200 feet. We have 3 200-foot loops that go down into the ground. And this diagram indicates how it works in the summer. And you can see it's appropriately shown in orange and blue. So imagine, if you will, this home. It's hot in the summertime, and you see that one of the loops is orange. That's the hot, or the warmer water that's being transferred down into the ground. And then there's a transfer, heat transfer between the loops and the ground, and it's cool. So you see that then the blue, the cooler water comes back into the house. So with geothermal, you don't need an air conditioner. You have a heat pumps, and I'll show you what the picture of what that looks like in a second. And so we cool the home, taking advantage of the cooler temperature of the soil. It's a very efficient heat pump exchange in the summertime, very inexpensive to cool your home. In the wintertime, it just reverses. You're taking advantage of the fact that the ground is warmer than is the air temperature, and you're doing a heat pump exchange. So here we go. So we start out with immense drilling equipment coming up on your lawn. We chose January to do this when it did dig into the lawn the least. And this company called The Whole Deal installed 3 of the loops. Here just shows what it's like. It's amazing how quickly this goes. They put the 200-foot loops in very, very short period of time. It was at least a day, but nevertheless quite short. Now, once those holes are placed in the ground, you can see there's a flexible high-density polyethylene pipe. That goes down into the ground. And then you see there's a gentleman working, and looks like he's making cement there with a cement bucket. He's preparing the grout that's going to go around the pipe, between the pipe and the ground, to allow efficient exchange of heat, and also to make sure that everything is there's no leaks in the aquifer. And then 3 loops are prepared, and now going back, these 3 loops have to be attached. You see there's only going to be 2 basically pipes going into the house. So they've attaching. You can see it is not a pretty picture on the lawn when they're in the process of doing this. It is invasive. And then ultimately, one of the pipes going up into the house, the other one coming out of the house and going to a unit that sits down where our furnace used to sit. And we'll go inside and take a look at that. So here you can see those black pipes, that one coming into the water furnace and the other leaving. So in the summertime, that is our air conditioner. It's all hooked up into the ducts, so the fans blow cool air that's extracted from the ground. In this winter, warm air, heat extracted from the ground. You notice to the right, there is our hot water heater. This unit also heats the hot water up to 120 degrees. Sometimes you have to augment it if it doesn't get it, if the demand is great, but it takes care of that function. We throw away the air conditioner, take it out. We just simply don't need it. It's all done with the water furnace. Now this shows how does it work and what does the energy costs. This is very recent data that put right up till yesterday actually, and it shows the annual on a monthly basis amount of energy that's used to drive the unit that's both heating and cooling the home. And I'd call your attention to the blue, which is the amount of energy used during the summer for air conditioning, in a sense, cooling your home. And you can see it's very efficient, very low cost in cooling your home with this system. Now, going on to October, November, December, it's getting colder. And so there is an increased demand on use of electricity to heat your home, and those different colors just reflect the level of the activity of the heating system involved. So it's a very effective, a very quiet, consistent, and I think both of us, Julie and I, would both say that we like it very much. Now we have more electricity demand because we put in geothermal. So how could we basically deal with that? So we contacted a company. Their name is New Prairie Construction. You can see it here, and talked with the individuals there. They looked at our home and said, "We don't think your home is very well suited for solar because the south side of the home, which is on the back side, is beneath a lot of trees, and you want the solars facing in the southern direction." And we pointed out that we were considering putting a pergola over the patio. You can see the patio, which is far away from the south side. And so they came out and said, yeah, this would be a good site to put for solar on the top of a pergola, getting it up and elevated. So what you can see there is the footings that have been built, been placed in the ground to get ready for the pergola. Construction began, and one of the things that we told New Prairie is we would like to have something that matched our back enclosed wood-paneled porch, which is cedar, and we would like something large enough to truly be helpful. And so New Prairie designed the pergola that they're now constructing, as you can see. And here you can see construction to the point where they're putting up solar panels, and this is the final product. I'll be honest, when Julie and I stepped out of the house and looked at this, I said, whoa, this is bigger than we expected, but we've come to really be very comfortable with it. It matches the house in terms of scale and size. These, having a pergola has some advantages in that you have some exposure from beneath, and so these panels that were selected are called bifacial. You get some of the solar energy from reflection off the ground, which increases the amount that you get. What's it look like sitting underneath it? It's a very pleasant environment to be in. You're shaded, and it's just very, very comfortable. I spent much of last summer under that. I broke a shoulder and had a shoulder replacement, and so sitting in a chair, reading and sleeping in that environment kind of softened the blow. Okay. How about energy production? Now this looks complicated, and so let me simplify. If you look at the red, that was the first year we put it in, 2016, and it was just put in June. So you can see that what I would point out, you see the little checks. Those are the estimated electricity. And if you look at the blue, it's the 2017, the only year that we've had a full year of use of the solar, and you can see it follows the distribution. As the days get longer, its production increases. As the day gets shorter, it goes down. Well, how much does it provide? About 2/3 of all the electricity we need. So it's been very, very productive. So we're looking at 24 panels, 3 rows of 8 panels. So it's really been extremely helpful in meeting our needs. Now, on the remainder of the electricity that we purchase is through the aggregate pole, similar to what Scott was describing. Champaign has one, and you can see the price that we pay for renewable energy is very close to what you'd be paying for standard energy, which is generated primarily by coal, natural gas. So it's possible basically to get to support the solar energy business by purchasing from, and that's an activity you can do with no effort whatsoever. It's just go right over to renewable. Now, how are we doing now that we put in the geothermal? Well, you can see now we've reduced our energy use, and we're down into the great in terms of category, in terms of energy. So it's put us in the category that we sought. And well, how much did it cost? All right. At the time we bought the geothermal, there was a federal tax incentive of 30%. So after we paid the tax incentive, the geothermal cost $16,000 essentially. The federal tax incentive for solar is the same, and that supported both building the pergola and the solar array because the pergola was built for the solar array. So the total cost of that was $26,000, so a combined cost of $43,000. The state of Illinois has a solar renewable energy credits, and what that means, so-called SRECs, and that means not only do we get the money for the electricity we generate, and so far we've generated about $3,500 of our own electricity on our solar array, but we're paid an extra $195 for every milliwatt hour. Now that incentive lasts 5 years, and it's estimated, as you can see on the slide, that we'll have a total of $8,385 by generating 43 milliwatt hours. And I checked yesterday, and we're pretty much right on target of getting to that level. So if you subtract that 8,000, we've spent a total of about 34,000 for both the geothermal, the pergola, and the solar array. And that's not counting the 3,000 we've saved. That figure is close to a car, a nice car. Unlike a nice car, it's what we've done to the home is not going to depreciate. As a matter of fact, we think it will very much enhance the value of the home once it's sold. So we feel that this decision not only was one that was made, that was made primarily for reasons other than economic, can really stands on solid legs in terms of an economic decision as well. And with that, I'll stop. Oh no, one more thing. This I think is playful, but I like it. Last year, we bought an electric battery-operated lawnmower. This is the first lawnmower we've ever owned that's self-propelled. Now the downside is I can't do both the front and the back of the yard on the self-propelled mode because it uses too much electricity. So I've adapted. So I do the front lawn, sit under the pergola and read for an hour while the battery recharges, and then do the backyard. Okay, thanks.
Well, that sounds terrible. Patrick?
Yeah.
Do you want to sit?
Yes, please. I'll be able to run the PowerPoint. I apologize right off the front because I was told I was going to do this kind of late in the game and I didn't have time to put together my own PowerPoint, so this is kind of techie. I'm going to try to summarize it the best I can.
Is this part okay?
Sure. So, well, the grid as we know it hasn't changed for about 100 years, and it's in the midst of changing now with all the renewables that are going to be coming online. So, to facilitate that and glean something before they become widespread on the grid, Ameren built the Technical Applications Center. We refer to it as the TAC, and we have a microgrid on that property. This is kind of an aerial shot of that. I guess first I'll go through some of the Ameren, Illinois facts. So in Illinois, we serve 1.2 million electric and 816,000 gas customers in 1,200 communities. We have 4,500 miles of electric transmission lines. Transmission is defined as 100,000 volts and above. We have 46,000 miles of electric distribution lines and 18,200 miles of natural gas. So in October 26, 2011, there was some legislation passed that required Ameren, Illinois to construct a smart grid testing infrastructure, our TAC center. Basically, we put up some poles and wire and some underground cable that would allow vendors and others to come in and test equipment on a live grid. that was the first step to get that built. Afterwards, we built the microgrid, and I've got some pictures of that coming up. But so the microgrid is one of the most advanced in North America that we have here in Champaign. It's actually part of a larger effort by Ameren to bring smarter, cleaner energy to the area. One of the unique capabilities of a microgrid is you can seamlessly go onto the grid and come off of the grid without seeing an outage. So say you're a critical load customer like a hospital and there is a major storm coming into the area. Because the electric grid has so many miles of circuits, there's more exposure and possibility that there could be an outage. So you might up front proactively put yourself on your microgrid, which may only take up 2 acres right outside your facility, instead of being exposed to the miles of line outside of the facility. So that's one unique property of the microgrid and a way that it might be utilized in the future. So here's our technical application center. I don't know, can you see the mouse on the screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got a building here. There's some smart appliances in there. They tested some LEDs, a variety of LED night lights in that building. So we've got the supply that comes in. We have at 69,000 volts. We have a transformer here that steps the voltage down to 12,000 volts. Then we have 2 circuits that come out. One of them actually goes out and serves retail customers. It's right there at Windsor and First Street. And then the other circuit stays within the yard. And so we have some poles here that were framed where a vendor could come in, install his equipment, and test at the facility here. And then we have some underground where they could come in and test some underground application. So right out in here is where the microgrid was built. I think I got it. So this is the inside of that building I already discussed.
I don't understand what it means for a vendor to come in and test it.
So if we had like S&C or Eaton or some other vendor that has some equipment that they would like to test, they can put it on the line, actually connect to a live grid, and test the equipment. If they want to see how many times they can open and close it before it fails, they can do that. Does that answer your question?
So it's electrical distribution equipment?
It is.
Okay.
Thank you. There's a lot going on this slide, but basically, like I said earlier, traditionally, you've got a power plant, wires to the load, power flows in one direction. That's the way it's been for a long time. The way we see it in the future is a lot of these distributed energy resources, solar, batteries, wind, being connected all around the grid, and power is going to flow in multiple directions. There's a lot of techie stuff on this slide, but basically, we wanted to build the grid so that we could learn some lessons from it before it becomes widespread. So we want to develop the skills to construct, operate, and maintain those assets, and then our findings we can distribute to the public and the communities that we serve and help them make some smarter choices. So here is the microgrid. We've got the wind turbine, we've got solar array, we've got 2 natural gas generators, and we have lithium-ion batteries here. And all of this connects to this green box in the middle and then goes back and connects into the substation. So there's a lot on these next few slides I'm not going to go over. I just wanted to get the rating of some of these assets. And so this is the wind turbines got a rating of 100 kW. And just to put that in perspective, most homes are around 5 to 10 kW. So this could power between 10 and 20 homes by itself. And it's 160 feet tall with the blade up.
And why don't you tell them where the center is?
Sure. So if you go down Neal Street, turn on St. Mary's to the east, and I think the next road, there's a cemetery there on the south side.
Mhm.
The next road, I believe, is Bailey. If you get on Bailey, south, just, I don't know, a few hundred feet off to the right is the TAC.
What are
And-
the opportunities to get a tour of it?
We do tours. I can definitely find out for you if they
Just
do
call.
private tours or public tours. Sure. So our solar array, it's 125 kW. It takes up 0.8 acres. Scott mentioned some of these larger arrays, the 2 megawatt arrays for community solar. I've heard anywhere between about 4 to 5 acres per megawatt. So a 2 megawatt array would be about 10 acres is typical. We've got 2 500 kW natural gas generators. And then we have a bank of lithium-ion batteries, and they're good for 250 kW for 2 hours. So when we're not putting power back out onto the grid, the solar, the wind, they can charge this battery up and it could be used. And it's actually skid mounted, so this could be taken to somewhere else and hooked up. I've heard maybe in the future, if you have a community that has had major damage and the community's main line is out, and it could be out for a long time, they've actually talked about bringing in large batteries that you could hook the community back up to and get them back in power while we're restoring the line. So that's one thing that can be done with these batteries once they improve them. So the microgrid went in service in 2016, December. Very quick construction and engineering. I mean, 6 months of engineering, that is really quick for something so complicated. And this is just a summary. So it was the first microgrid to serve an entire distribution feeder with retail customers. There's seamless transition from the grid. So this thing can actually be islanded where you are not reliant on the grid. You're serving about 200 homes from all of those assets that I showed earlier. And it's the most diverse mix of renewable assets. And the last one's not really important. So that was all I have on the TAC and the microgrid. I do have some other information I was going to share about community solar, but if you have any questions about the TAC or the microgrid, I'd be happy to try to answer.
I think we better get your other information. Once we start asking questions, we don't stop.
All right. Okay, well, let me find it here. I pulled some information from the Citizens Utility Board website on community solar. I didn't know how much you knew about community solar, so I thought I've just got some things highlighted here. So what is community solar? Illinois' new community solar program allows Ameren, Illinois, and Commonwealth Edison up in Chicago electricity customers to enjoy the benefits of solar energy even if they can't install solar panels on their own property. So basically, if a developer installs a solar panel array at one of these 2 megawatt arrays in Decatur, you could actually subscribe to the energy being produced by that array and get a discount on your bill. So the next one here is, how does community solar work? So under Illinois' community solar program, subscribers can enter into an agreement to help fund a solar energy installation in their community. Each subscriber then receives a credit on their supply section of their bill for electricity that was generated by the solar array in proportion to the size of the subscription they purchased. So they've got an example here. Say you used 1,000 kilowatt hours of electricity in a month, and your share of the community solar project produced 200 kilowatt hours of electricity. That means you would just receive a credit on your bill amounting to your supply rate multiplied by your 200 kilowatt of electricity. So ultimately, you're only responsible for the 800 kilowatt hours. And that array, like I said, could be in Decatur, any Ameren, Illinois territory that it's installed on, you could subscribe to it. One of the questions here is, what are the general requirements for the community solar program? So the solar array has to be less than 2 megawatts. The minimum subscription per customer is 200 watts of output. No individual subscriber can own or lease more than 40% of a project. And Ameren and Commonwealth Edison in Chicago is required to buy any energy output that hasn't been subscribed to. So, and then I've got one more thing here. Are there restrictions on who can participate? No, residential and business customers can participate as subscribers in community solar projects. So one more thing I might add is, I'm aware of at least 6 of these community solar projects in Champaign and Urbana right now. None of them have come to fruition. We're studying the effects of the arrays on the grid. The 2 that I've dealt with didn't have a negative impact on the grid. Told the developer that, and they requested a detailed estimate from Ameren to connect to the grid. So we are currently in that 30-day window to get them an estimate, and then they have 45 days to tell us if they want to proceed. So these are, and across Ameren, Illinois as a whole, we've got 200 applications for these 2 megawatt arrays. So that's all I had.
Okay, are there any questions for our panel? Oh, good, I get to start then. My husband and I are in for one of the Teslas they're building right now, and so we're thinking about both a solar roof, solar shingles rather than solar panels, and then also probably a power wall. Do any of you have any thoughts about those, or how that would work with our local grid? Are we really ready for that kind of electrical involvement?
I guess from a utility perspective, whenever a solar array is installed, it has a certain rating, and we need to make sure from a utility perspective that if there is backfeed, and there should be backfeed, your panel is not large enough to overload any of our equipment on the line. So I don't know what an entire roof of small solar panels would output, but it could mean that there could be some equipment out on the line that might be overloaded by the backfeed.
With 2 years of bulk solar purchase in Urbana, 81 installations one year and 40-some, 50-some the next year, I heard very good things about Ameren's ability to get those connected with a bidirectional meter and manage that electricity flowing both ways. So I have the utmost confidence that Ameren will be just fine with your installations.
Well, that's good to hear. It's going to be a little while. Yes.
Have you, a comment regarding, a comment regarding the roof, the Tesla has come out with the roof tiles that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Have you looked at the cost for your home and its suitability to shade and so
We
forth?
have looked at the cost for our home and the percentage of our home that is shaded and how much of our home is southern exposure, and we are actually a good fit.
I've looked at our home, and I expect, like so many things, the cost will go down, but I had $100 and some thousand estimate for our home, but I think I see them as a wonderful possibility in the future. But particularly, and I don't know how this is going to, get into the grid, and it's a little hard to predict the future, and as I can see it with electricity delivery. But if these roof tiles become competitively priced, and batteries for storing excess electricity in your home, if that advances, I mean, I could see a scenario where people become more and more independent of the grid, and I don't know how that, how to work that into.
Well, it makes the grid a more complicated place. I'm sure that Patrick will have
Yeah.
plenty to do.
Yeah, all the renewables that are going to come online in the future, they are going to make my job interesting. So it's totally new to us right now. So these large 2 megawatt solar installations, we didn't even know how to analyze them on the system. So there's been a learning curve there. So.
I wanted to ask Mr. Sherwood what your experience with humidity in the summer has been without the air conditioner to dry things out.
Well, we do have a dehumidifier that we use in the basement. The basement has always been a little bit more problematic, and we've always had that. We had 2 dehumidifiers because it's almost the size of our home for several years, and we're using 1 now, and I keep that on in the summertime. Yes. But so we haven't had no problems. It's just that humidity is an issue, and you have to be aware of it and see to it doesn't go too high.
I was wondering if the city used hot water heat directly from the sun in any location that the city uses.
We don't have any solar thermal right now, so all of our water heating is done with natural gas. We have evaluated all of the rooftops on the facilities that the city owns, and for the most part, they don't have enough lifetime left on them to warrant putting solar panels on, because you'd have to uninstall the solar panels and then reinstall them a second time, which is going to hurt the financial prospects of such a project. So we haven't had any solar thermal installations. The one solar electric installation we had was a facility where we could put the panels on the ground, and so that's why we were able to proceed with that one. But solar thermal is something we're always going to keep in the mix as something to evaluate.
A different question. I recently read that we're using about 1/3 of our fossil fuel to produce concrete, and I wondered if there was anything to change how much concrete we're required to produce.
It's an interesting question. It really gets into upstream greenhouse gases that aren't in your fence row, narrowly defined. In terms of paving material, depending on how you do the accounting, asphalt versus concrete can come up with different profiles. And I haven't looked at it in a while to remember which one is more greenhouse gas intensive than the other. But I think concrete is often a preferred paving material to things like asphalt because of its durability. So that, it depends on the timeline you're interested in. So if you're talking about 1 day or 1 year, that may be a different profile in terms of greenhouse gases than 50 years or 100 years. So that's some of the tricky analysis. For us, cost is always going to be a driver in terms of the choices we make for different procurements as well. So those are some of the things we'll have to evaluate.
Could I follow up on that, not with a comment, but a question? I don't know enough about how concrete is made. Can renewables meet the need for concrete construction? I just simply don't know the mechanics of it.
I think the issue with concrete is you need a lot of heat, and so that could be difficult. I mean, it depends. So, for instance, sustainability folks look very favorably on capturing landfill gas or wastewater treatment gas and burning that. Maybe that produces enough heat for concrete. I don't know. But in terms of us, going from solar to concrete manufacturing, that may not work.
And I'll just follow up with the concrete and the manufacturing. I toured Wholesome Cement in Missouri, and they are a very large consumer of electricity. They are actually stationed adjacent to a power plant and have 2 lines running directly to it from the power plant. So I don't know how much energy renewables would be required to run that.
Scott, are they going to have the solar panel program again for the county this year?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be announcing the 3rd round of solar Urbana Champaign sometime in the next couple of weeks. We've selected a vendor, and the prices are really good, and most importantly, the state incentives are better than they've ever been. So this is going to be a really good year for folks to get into solar Urbana Champaign. What I recommend is, this program all starts with 1 or 2 dozen solar power hours that we conduct. It's an A to Z, everything you need to know about solar energy and also about this purchasing opportunity. So just come to a solar power hour. There will be all over Urbana, Champaign County, and we're also extending to Monticello and Piatt County this year. So we're looping in a little bit bigger market area. But come to a solar power hour and see if it's a good fit for you. It's not a good fit for everyone. If your southern and eastern and western roof pitches are all shaded, may not be a good fit for you. But there are lots of opportunities. We've been working, encouraging local banks to tailor loans specifically for solar. The credit union did that last year. Maybe they'll do it again this year. And then what's new is we have more solar installers that are helping homeowners arrange power purchase agreements, which is a setup where you don't have to pay the upfront costs for the solar array. You just sign a multi-year contract to buy all the power it produces. So that's a new opportunity as well.
2 things. One is the issue of using solar on the landfill. Is there enough space, and is there consideration for using that space for commercial composting facility? And I realize that if you don't do solar, you want to do something, and I would be interested to hear that's consideration, because I think that the community could benefit a lot from having commercial composting. The other thing I wanted to ask is, I think last week there were hearings on zoning for solar farms, and the issue seems to be the amount of setback. Can you explain that issue?
Sure. Let's start with the first one. Maybe you're thinking of food scrap composting? Is that what you're thinking of? Okay. So we have the Landscape Recycling Center, which composts landscape trimmings. And there are some communities that are getting into food scrap composting. There are some barriers to us doing that. We've had some discussions internally, but we haven't moved forward with it yet. I would encourage you to keep talking to city staff, elected officials, and friends and neighbors about what you're interested in and how we can get over some of those barriers. Probably, one of the barriers is a facility. Those are private facilities in the Chicago area, as far as I know. I don't see that happening just for food scrap customers here. So it seems like the most likely scenario would be utilizing and changing the permit at the Landscape Recycling Center to also accept food scrap. So that has some challenges, but let's keep talking about that. Second question was, you also mentioned, is there space? The Landscape Recycling Center is there. It's not going anywhere. We're talking about utilizing an additional 40 acres, which is fairly well suited for solar. This first 2 megawatt solar array that we're working on developing, as Patrick mentioned, is going to be 8 to 10 acres. So there's still more space for additional solar. we're going to keep working to fill up all that space with some productive use, such as solar, as long as we can find projects to do so. In terms of the county zoning, that's a discussion about creating a solar farm ordinance for unincorporated Champaign County. So it wouldn't affect anything in the city of Urbana. In terms of setbacks from the panels, there doesn't seem to be a need for any substantial setbacks for panels. Folks have them on the roof. We have them behind the arbor shop at the city building. There may be there's an additional piece of equipment called an inverter, which does have a hum, so it has a little bit of noise, but it's quite low. We've looked at some of the decibel ratings on those products, and it's quite low. So it's pretty basic and moderate caution of where to locate that should be sufficient.
How big of a footprint did it rip up in your yard when you put in the geothermal?
I'm sorry, Mike, you're hearing.
How large of an area in your yard did you have to rip up to dig the holes for your geothermal?
Oh,
How much
that's a
space
good-
does it
that's-
require?
That's a good question. We originally, to be specific, it's recommended that these wells, the loops, be placed 15 feet apart, although they can go down to as little as 10 feet apart. We did not have access to our backyard, so they had to go somewhere in the front yard, and it turns out that we had trees that we couldn't get that big equipment under. So we ended up putting in 3 rather than 4 wells, and so access was a problem for us, and in some cases that's not is not the case. So the total distance would be, well, they're 10. In our case, we went 10 feet apart because of the restricted. So that'd be 10, a total of 20 feet apart, right?
Yeah.
One in the middle. Maybe a little over that.
What can you tell us about the durability of solar arrays? We had a house in southeastern Colorado in the late 70s and early 80s that was new and had been built with a solar array. And I'm told that the solar arrays in that neighborhood now are having to be replaced. And I'm wondering what the story is there.
So all the solar panels you're going to buy go through all the type of product testing for any electrical equipment. They are rated to survive hail. They are rated to survive the same winds that your roof is rated for. So you're never going to have a scenario where, it was windy and the solar panels came off but the roof didn't. So they're very durable in that sense. The panels themselves very typically have a 25-year warranty. So if something goes wrong with the equipment within that, it's going to get replaced. The panel production, how much electricity it produces for every hour of sunlight, is guaranteed also, but it's guaranteed to decline by a certain amount over time. It's just wear and tear like any other piece of equipment. It gets less efficient over time. But and it's different for each manufacturer, each product, but by the end of the 25-year warranty period, you're still producing 70 or 75% as much electricity with that panel as you did on day one. And just because the warranty period's over doesn't mean that the solar panel switches off and is worthless anymore. It's going to keep producing electricity. Maybe in year 30 there will be, one panel will have some fatal flaw and not produce anymore. And it's out of the warranty period, so you can't replace it. But aside from that, they'll keep producing, but they will continue to decline in their efficiency. There's this other piece of equipment called an inverter. Those typically have a 10-year lifespan. They're only, a couple $1,000s, a few $1,000s. So they're going to be replaced by the manufacturer if they have a failure in the first 10 years. And then whoever the owner of the array is would be responsible for after the fact. So it's a pretty long-lived piece of equipment. And if you're looking at, last year, I think the prices folks in our program ended up paying for a residential application, had something like a 7 to 8 year payback period. So you break even on your, on all the savings on your power bill versus the cost of the purchase in 7 or 8 years, and the equipment's warranted for 25. That's a pretty good deal.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I would like to thank our panel. Next month, we will be having our annual meeting on May 16th in the evening. We are looking forward to, our normal board meeting, but also we'll be having Professor Suya Thomas from the U of I will be coming to talk to us about disappearing American juries. Thank you very much.